Welcome to Mixed Media Creations with me, Creative Katie, Karen Burchell. Did you know you could follow me on Instagram? www.instagram.com/Creative Katie. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and share it with your crafting friends. Today, we have kind of a double tutorial. We're going to create a background using the plastic embroidery mesh, and then you make an art journal page using that background called Swim with the Mermaids. As always, links to supplies used or similar supplies are in the description box below.
Now I just want to talk about backgrounds. When you're starting as a beginning, there's so many techniques that you can do and to create layered and textured backgrounds. You can use modeling paste, you can have collage sheets underneath, you can put stencils and stamps and create really interesting backgrounds. But when you're starting out as a beginner, don't think that you have to always go so complex, that you have to use multiple techniques and a whole variety of materials, because you can create a lovely background using 3 colors and 1 mark making tool. So I am going to there will be another video that kind of goes with this one where I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite mark making tools that you can get on the cheap, if not for free, that you can use to create wonderful textured backgrounds. So we're going to come back to this and I will finish this up, and there's another way I use this in the finishing. So this is just my mixed media page in my art journal. It is, I like the Canson mixed media. This is a 7 by 10. It's a good size. It's not overly intimidating. Okay, so before we go and create the background with a different color scheme, I'm going to show you how I select my colors. Now this is a color wheel. And if you have, one side of it will have 5 spaces. Those are analogous colors. And what you get when you use analogous colors is you will get things that work well together, things that when they're wet, they will not make mud. So if they blend. So for this one, for the creation of this one, I used my Americana paints, and I used teal mint, which is over there, the royal fuchsia, which is kind of in there, and I used a couple of purples as well, Diox purple, and this is actually a folk art and it says eggplant. So when I did this, this was just cleanup paint. And then I added, you can see, I added some white. You can add white and or black to it, as well as some metallic should you want to. So what I'm going to do now, so if using that analogous color scheme, if I wanted to surefire, I could use these colors, yellow, orange, red in there. So maybe we'll do a couple of these, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to move into here. So yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, kind of into the blue violet. Now you can use craft paints if you like. You can also use heavier bodied paint like Liquitex Basics, or in this case Artist Loft. I only have the yellow green in this one. So let's just get started. What I did is I'm just going to get a base cut color on here. Now these, I don't use them often. And I'm just going to put a little bit. And that's where that other one started, because I was just cleaning up really leftover paint. Come on. More than one way to skin a cat. And I just like, you know, don't overthink it. If it's not going on too smoothly, you can, and I often do, spray a little bit of water just to make it flow a little bit better. I don't really want this to blend out. Too much. And it doesn't even need to be 100% coverage, because we are going to be adding layers with our excellent mark making tool. Okay. Another thing you can do when you're making this is just use 3 colors that are the same. So 3 different blues or 3 different pinks. Not cleaning even my brush for the most part until now, when I just want to and that will help when you have analogous colors. When they blend, when they're wet, they won't make mud. If you go across something like an orange and a blue, they are complementary colors, they're across from each other on the color wheel, they pop, they will look lovely together on a page, but if you mix them when wet, that's when you will make mud. Okay, so I'm going to dry this and come back. Okay, so now that it's dry, you can see I've got brush strokes in there. There's even some spots that don't really have color, and I'm not too worried, right? Because it all adds interest, right? So if it's curling, we'll do that. So now what I've done is I've just cut some pieces from the plastic embroidery, and you could put the paint on right on your craft mat if you wanted to, or you can put it on some kind of platform or some kind of surface. And this is just the lid from. Then I'm just with a brush or your finger or anything you got handy, and we're just going to push that in there. And put this on. Have some going off the page. Don't overthink this. Just have fun playing with color. We may come back to this color, but just this is the starting point. So and since I'm going to revisit many of these colors, I'm going to have them in different places on my work surface so I can get at them. I'm not even washing this or rinsing it. Now sometimes if there's more paint on it, I don't know if you can see, but it kind of gives a little bit of texture as well. Not just visual texture, but now, sometimes I just curve it like this because I want to get part of the surface. Now that didn't show up too much, but we're going to add multiple layers here. So don't be too worried about it. I think I'm going to add some white at this time. If you use thicker paint, you're more likely to get the textured look. Oops. Now don't worry too much. This is very organic. When you're using a homemade mark making tool, it's not going to be overly precise. And I'm just turning it different ways and angles because, whoops, just to make interest. I don't want it to be too thought up. And you can play with the size. This one is, 3 by 2, 3 by 3, somewhere in that vicinity. Now you can stop at any time if you don't want it to meld together, and I'm just cycling through most of the colors that I've used, although I wouldn't say that's my definite goal. This is where you just go and have fun. Don't overthink. When you start out, when you're a beginner, you're just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So you can see how the colors are all mixing. You kind of get that layered look. Thinking at this time I'm going to try some of this. And I think what I like what I see. You kind of stop when you like what you see. We've got some visual texture, some interesting texture. This would make a nice for negative painting. What I'm going to do here now, I am going to add some gold. I just like seeing that little bit of gold in my Now this time, I have no idea what's going on here as a focal point. As a focal point, I can choose something that's still in this color scheme, or I could go across into the corals and reds and violets, and that's really going to pop because it's a complementary color. gonna turn this off and see, maybe you can see that shimmer. It just adds so nice. If I had more blues than I had greens, I might have gone with silver there for the metallic shine, or pearlescence.
So the rest of the video I've sped up to 2 times. Now I bought this stencil, and there are 3 stencils in this pack. It is an Art Minds stencil. They are fairly thick. I like them. I've bought other ones, this brand, and it's pretty good value for your money because you get 3 sheets of stencils with lots of different components on a theme. Some have 2, some have 3 components in there. And I bought it because I have many ideas for some beach-themed canvases. But, you know, as always, I want to try the stencils and see how they work and see if it spurns on any new ideas. So I reached for my black because I'm thinking I want to have that contrast, but then I'm thinking that might be a little too stark. So I grab one of my blues in the craft paint, and I'm using a makeup sponge to apply this. Now you can see that I stamp off, I get some paint on it, and then I stamp most of it off. When you're stenciling, less is more. I am not pressing down hard on the sponge in real life, although it may look that way, and you know, I'm trying to get a lot of the paint off. It's a better idea to apply a second or third coat and just build up gradually. I was much happier once I mixed in the blue. It really suited the blue-green background. And I've done that before using Payne's Gray, which has a blue tone instead of black. So this was another part of the stencil, and again, you have different components, and you can use these however you want to. And I'm just kind of making this up as I go, you know, as I come up with ideas. I love these grasses going up. And again, this has gotten to be more blue, so it's more black and darker at the top with the swim with the mermaids is more blue, then the bottom part is even more blue, less black. And that's another way to build interest. So as I go to do the mermaid, I think, you know what, I'm going to grab my Pebeo iridescent blue-black paint. And I know this is very translucent, which means you're going to still be able to see the patterning and mark making that I made in this background through this. And I was just kind of curious how this would work, and I actually really liked the effect. It kind of has an iridescence to it. Depending on how you position it, it looks blue or looks black. So much so I decided I'm going to put this over top of the seaweed here, because this part of the page is more my focal point. Then I take bits and parts of that seaweed and add more seaweed in and around the mermaid. And this kind of stencil is good for this because you can, you know, build your focal point the way you want it, not exactly as the stencil is. So I'm kind of putting a bit here, putting a bit there, shorter ones, longer ones, and just kind of even bumping the stencil. I'm thinking of putting it at the top, and then I nix the idea because then I bump the stencil. By bumping the stencil, I mean that you put it in one position and then you just move it a little bit. Now I'm using slightly different colors, a little less paint or a little bit more paint, and that gives difference in the seaweed. So they look different in there. I'm really liking this color scheme and how this page has come together. There really was no plan when I made this background to use the stencil with it. There was no definite plan when I bought this. This is my Prussian blue, and it is more liquidy paint, and I'm just using it and I'm just edging around the border. And again, I'm not using black because I don't want the starkness of black. So I could have used Payne's Gray. The Prussian blue is kind of a blue-green one. I wasn't sure it'd be dark enough, but it tries. But you give it a try and you see. I could always have gone over that with Payne's Gray if this wasn't dark enough. And I'm just adding a little bit on the corner of the angle brush and basically doing the floating acrylic technique here, but very loosely. I just want to soften, kind of give this page a frame and soften the edges. And I do build up the intensity of color little by little. So I grabbed my Liquitex Basics, I believe this is copper, and I'm just going to sponge these little tiny starfishes across the bottom. Now the copper is not very opaque. You're going to see through it and it's not going to be a big bold color, and I don't want it to be. I don't want them to stand out. I want them to kind of look like they're under the sea. And I'm putting some, half a starfish is getting stenciled on, some it's a quarter of a starfish. You know, I'm trying to turn the stencil so I get, you know, a few of these starfish across the bottom of the page. Trying to decide if I'm happy with this as it is. And I decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to add a few splatters to this. You can't really make this out in the video, but it did add a little bit of detail. I might have gone in afterwards or thought, okay, maybe next time maybe white would have been a good addition there. It just kind of makes, any splatters kind of makes the whole page work together because it goes over all the layers and all the additions. So I'm wondering if my focal point stands out enough, and I could have left this as it is. And while I'm thinking, I think, okay, I'm going to go around with my fine liner bottle. This is filled with acrylic paint. It's black paint that I've thinned it to the consistency that I like. It's just kind of trial and error. It's having a little bit of problem. I think the paint has gotten a little old. It's been there for quite some time. So I think it's time to empty that bottle and put in some new stuff. It's kind of globbing in there. Because I think this one I just actually used my craft paint. And I decide, you know, I am going to outline the mermaid in the black. I just want her to stand out just a smidge more. I could have outlined her in gold. I could have outlined her in white. You know, if I had wanted to take the time, I could take some Prussian blue or Payne's Gray and use that. But I figured with the thin line, it's not overly stark. And it did help to make the mermaid stand out just that little bit more. So after making sure that's dry, I decide I'm going to use the white in the fine liner bottles and outline the word mermaids. I just want it to pop off a little bit. And there is white in the background, so you're adding a color and a component that you already have in it. So, you know, I'm turning the page as I go to make it easier not to put my hand in the wet paint. I could have stenciled this. So I'm just going to finish this off. And I like the addition of the white here. But again, this, you know, those are personal choices that you make in the finishing of your pages or projects. And if you're quick, you can remove it and reapply it, if everything underneath it is acrylic and is permanent. So that ends this page. I have some pictures of the Finish Art Journal page. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you give it a try creating a background using the embroidery mesh. There's another video that I used. I create a background and do a different kind of focal point. There's also a video where I show my top 5 mark making tools that you can get on the cheap that you can use to create interesting backgrounds. Be sure to like my video, leave a comment, and share the video with your friends. This is a great video for beginners. Thanks for watching. See you next video.